Well, let's get more analysis on the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which is causing chaos in oil markets. Jennifer Parker is adjunct professor at the University of Western Australia Defence and Security Institute and is with me now. Very good morning to you, Jen. We know that the Strait is essentially controlled by two navies. You've got the Iranian Republic and you've got the IRGC Navy. Exactly what are these two capabilities in light of we are now 13 days into this war?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me on, Kath. You're absolutely right. Iran has two navies, the Revolutionary Guard Navy, which is typically the navy that operates in the Strait of Hormuz. It is small boats, asymmetric capabilities, uncrewed surface vessels, uncrewed aerial vehicles, and they have hundreds of them. Iran also has a conventional navy, frigates, destroyers, mine layers. That has been largely destroyed by the US in the last 13 days. So the focus really is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy and their capabilities to threaten vessels in the Strait and in the Persian Gulf.
You say that they have asymmetric capabilities. What exact weaponry is at Iran's disposal when it comes to drones, mines, missiles in this area?
Yeah, so they have uncrewed surface vessels that have been basically explosive boats, for want of a better term, that have been used to attack merchant vessels across the Persian Gulf in the last 13 days. They also have a range of uncrewed aerial vehicles. They do have cruise missiles. They do also have mines, both complex mines and generic kind of floating mines. These are difficult to combat because some of these mines, for example, now I don't think the Strait has been mined, there's no confirmation of that, but some of these can be deployed from wooden fishing vessels, any kind of vessel opportunity. So even though the US is reporting that it has destroyed the majority of Iran's mine-laying vessels, to be honest, you could deploy this for a range of capabilities. So the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy is really the threat at the moment, as well as the launching of uncrewed aerial vehicles from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard from the shoreline of Iran. And that is really the pressure that the US is trying to deal with. We saw Central Command, who are executing this campaign in the Middle East, say about a day ago that Iranians should keep clear of any port facilities. Clearly, they're about to commence an intensive bombing campaign across the Iranian coast. But still, it'll be difficult to target some of these capabilities. Many of them are still in underground bunkers, which means it's harder to hit.
You were, Jen, in the Strait of Hormuz, I believe, in 2020 and 23. Can you give us a sense of exactly what it's like there, its expanse and just how narrow it is when you come to that chokehold?
Yeah, look, it's a really constrained waterway. At its narrowest point, it's about 33 kilometres across. But not all of that is navigational water. In fact, navigational water at some tight points is only a couple of kilometres. Now, normally you'd be seeing over 100 ships going through that a day. You'd be seeing a lot of fishing vessels in and around that area, and you'd normally see quite a bit of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy operating there as well. Clearly, there's been a significant reduction in the merchant vessels going through. It's not true that it's closed. In fact, Iran has managed to send some of its oil tankers from Hag Island, which is its main oil terminal in the Persian Gulf, through, likely to feed oil to China. But more broadly, ships really aren't going through, which is causing that pressure. Yeah. But again, highly congested waterway. One of the challenges is if you have a UAV, uncrewed aerial vehicle, uncrewed surface vessel, fired or launched at you, there's not a lot of room to manoeuvre and not a lot of time to defend yourself.
You mentioned not a lot are going through, which means that you would presume that a whole lot of crew is stuck waiting in waters in the inside of that Gulf. I've read 20,000, up to 20,000 people. What would life be like for them just waiting?
Yeah, look, it would be a pretty anxious wait. Iran clearly is in this phase of the war where they are targeting innocent merchant seamen. A number have sadly died. The problem with these vessels waiting both in the Persian Gulf and outside of the Persian Gulf to go through is where vessels are congested like that, they become a bigger target and easier to hit. Of course, there's been a focus on Iran targeting these vessels during this conflict, but Iran has traditionally targeted merchant vessels, and merchant mariners have sadly commonly lost their lives. When I was deployed there in 2020 during the last Gulf crisis, it was in response to Iran limpet mining ships in the Gulf of Oman that were waiting to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So it must be a very anxious and tense wait for these civilian merchant mariners.
Jen, we know that the US and I believe France in the last 24 hours has suggested it could escort ships through the Strait. Is that realistic? Is it possible at all?
It is possible, but I would say it's highly unlikely anytime soon. There's a couple of complications for that. One, the limited room to manoeuvre in that strait and the limited warning time of something being launched at you makes that a really dangerous operation. Now, while Iran still seems to have a significant inventory of uncrewed aerial vehicles and uncrewed surface vessels, that probably isn't wise. The second thing is it is very intensive on warships and also fighter aircraft that you would have above you in the strait to do. That would distract the US and take forces away from the targets they're trying to hit in Iran to reduce Iran's ballistic missile and uncrewed aerial vehicle capabilities. So I think this is unlikely in the near term, despite the statements. We may see one or two to kind of really reassure the merchant mariner community and kind of reduce the deterrence of ships not wanting to go through. But in terms of significant escorts and seeing large amounts of ships going through the strait, that's unlikely. It's too dangerous an operation right now.
Jen, how long do you think Iran can keep a tight stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz, and what could the US or Israel do to really effectively, materially change that?
Well, look, if the US is starting a bombing campaign on Iranian ports and on the coastline, if they can reduce the UAVs, uncrewed aerial vehicles, uncrewed surface vessels, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy, that will reduce Iran's ability to undertake strikes on merchant vessels. Once that occurs, you'll see more confidence of vessels going through the strait. The other thing the US could do, but it would not be consistent with the law of armed conflict, is start targeting the Iranian merchant vessels going through the strait. But that would be a breach of the international law, the law of armed conflict. They are not a lawful target. That would deter Iran, because at the moment we actually do have Iranian oil, as I mentioned, going through the strait, but no other oil going through. That is highly unlikely. So really, I think we've probably got at least another week until the US can start to reduce this arsenal that Iran is using. Then you may start to see some ships flow through, but it will take a long time to get to the normal throughput because they'll need to convince the merchant mariners that it's safe to go through.